Hi, this is Brandon Dahl, founder of Sports and Entertainment Advisors, and this is the Sports Business Conversations podcast from ADC Partners.
Hey, this is Dave Almy, and appreciate you dropping by to check out this latest episode of the Sports Business Conversations podcast. If you like what you hear, please go ahead and leave a rating or review. Believe me, it's always appreciated. Now, there's an African expression that people who serve in the Navy hear a lot. It goes, "Smooth seas do not make skillful sailors." Basically, it means that your skill isn't developed unless you find yourself in tough situations. No one knows this better than Brandon Dahl, founder of Sports and Entertainment Advisors. After leaving the comparatively smooth seas of the U.S. Navy, Dahl found himself working for the Oakland Raiders, a team that more or less lived in the eye of a hurricane. Not one to shy away from choppy seas, and I'll apologize here because seafaring analogies are pretty hard to stop once you get rolling. Dahl eventually played an instrumental role in relocating the franchise to Las Vegas, a move that transformed the financially underperforming team into the fifth most valuable NFL franchise. In our conversation, we talk about the skills Dahl developed during his naval service that apply to his sports business career today, what goes into relocating an NFL franchise, and what led him to start Sports and Entertainment Advisors, an agency that specializes in helping teams with their revenue challenges. So thanks again for checking out my conversation with Brandon Dahl, founder of Sports and Entertainment Advisors. Hope you enjoy. Brandon, you graduated from the United States Naval Academy and spent a little over 7 years in the Navy. And you spent 3 of those on the USS Boxer, right, which is a big ship carries around Marines. Military service, at least in the way I look at it, seems pretty far from sports business. So when we get started, I want to let's lay a foundation. So when you think about your military service and you think about what you're doing now, what are the skills that you think you picked up that are most relevant to you today and the work that you're doing?
I'd say there's 3. So the first one is,
like a good military man, you come with a list.
I come with a list. So when you go to the Naval Academy and you're a plebe, a freshman, one of the first things you learn is the 5 basic responses. Yes, sir, or ma'am. No, sir. Aye, sir. No excuse, sir. I'll find out, sir. So you notice one of those 5 basics is not, I don't know. And that's been ingrained, to put it lightly, into me. So I think, I'm a natural problem solver by DNA. I was the kid who'd put Legos together, throw out the box, put them back together. And so I just, and it served me well as an employee, and now it's serving me well as a business owner and as a consultant. When somebody comes to me with a problem, it's always, I'll find out, sir or ma'am. So I think that's number one. Number 2.
So no shrugging of the shoulders and saying, I don't know, right? We'll go figure out what the answer is going to be.
Good. Yeah. No good luck. And look, I may not have the answer, but part of that is I'll go find somebody who can. Right. And so that's, I've also built a network of people around me who do things a lot better than I do, if that's a problem that my clients are trying to solve. Number 2, I'd say leadership under pressure. At the end of the day, sports is fun, but there's nobody's life is at risk. And I wasn't any combat or active combat. There's no bullets flying over my head. But, there were times when I was a surface warfare officer where we'd be simulating combat in our combat information center. And I've got, the CIC officer screaming at me saying, there's missiles inbound, trying to make it as real as it possible. And you're training so that when the real situation happens, that you can handle that situation. And so I think that calm under pressure, navigating a 40,000 ton warship through San Diego Harbor, if you don't like parallel parking, that job is not for you. And so, being able to maintain calm, maintain poise in those sorts of situations it just makes everything else a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that you kind of, you provided some context that it wasn't like in a combat zone, but I mean, the military is a dangerous place to begin with, right? So there are things happening every day that provide their own unique challenges. So I appreciate that is pressure doesn't necessarily come just from bullets flying over your head. Like you said, parallel parking a 40,000 ton warship is definitely going to add a level of yikes to the whole thing. Exactly. All right, what's number 3?
Number 3, I would say, is just sort of an overall discipline.
Yeah.
And, operational discipline. I've developed a penchant for execution and accountability. At the end of the day, if somebody tells me, hey, here's a goal, and that's your goal, you're going to be held accountable to that, whether it's a client or an employer, I take that very seriously. And that was foundationally set in the military and something that I've carried forward.
Because they are constantly weighing and measuring you. Right,
yes.
There is no moment in
literally.
the military. Yeah, I mean, literally, right? You got the CFE or whatever you have to take care of too. Yeah, so I appreciate that, right? When you have someone always looking at you and evaluating you and doing peer reviews and literally having your physical self being evaluated, it's hard to imagine that doesn't become part of who you are and how you operate in the world. Just kind of that's how you do it.
Yeah.
So you're in the Navy. You're for 7 years, and then you do something that maybe is even further from military service and working in sports business. You go and get your MBA at Berkeley, Cal Berkeley, which is, I think, kind of famous for not being very right of center. It's pretty left of center. So, talk about that, if you would. Going from military service, not just to academia, but to academia in sort of the famously progressive Berkeley area. And what was that transition like for you?
Yeah, well, and you're a Bay Area guy, so you know personally.
I speak. I know of which I speak.
Indeed, and I'm still holding you to that Lagunitas meetup.
But we should be doing this right there, right now. Quite frankly, we should
live from Lagunitas and Petaluma. It's live a little early
at 10:30 in the morning. I mean, it's 4:00 somewhere, baby.
We'll do a follow up. No, look. So I grew up in a very conservative town in Central California, agricultural town, Lodi, California, and you know Lodi. So, sort of a Bible Belt of California in its own right. Very conservative parents, and so when I told my folks that I was going to Berkeley, my dad's going, "Are you crazy?
Did you hit your head on that boat?"
Yeah, exactly. I did a few times, but are you? Because it is sort of famous for anti-war protesting and whatnot. For sure. However, sort of two things on that. First of all, this is the business school. This isn't, the liberal arts, one of the liberal arts schools. Yeah. And so a little bit different, probably a little more maybe financially conservative, socially liberal. Yep. But I found the business school to be totally different than, there was still a little bit of culture shock going from the military, which is very maintain the status quo, to an organization or to an institution where one of the defining principles is literally question the status quo. Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit of culture shock there, but I found the community there to be incredibly accepting of military veterans. I had a lot of Israeli classmates, very diverse. About a third of the students are international, which is a wonderful experience to learn from them and their experience and perspective. But it's a community that really values military service and values diversity of thought. And veterans bring a diversity of thought. There were about 12 of us in my class that were military veterans, U.S. military veterans, and then another probably 12 that were Israeli military veterans, and maybe a couple others. I think there was a guy from the UK. But I found it to be incredibly welcoming of my perspective. And then at the same time, right, you have to meet them where they are, meet the community where it is. You also have to be open-minded and lean in. And so I think I had a perception going into it that was very quickly disarmed. And look, at the end of the day, Berkeley, and I mentioned the defining principles, which Rich Lyons, who was the dean at the time and is now the chancellor, very culture-focused person. And that really resonated, that mission, culture, cultural pillars, defining principles, right? The Navy has honor, courage, and commitment. Yeah. And then the Haas Business School has their defining principles. So I actually found the transition to be easier than you might think.
Right. If you're coming at an organization that does have at least the principles in place, how you marry those principles of what you were doing to where you are going does become a little bit more streamlined than it
Yep.
might have been. But I'm curious then, so you're at Berkeley. At what point did the sports business thing hit you, right? Because clearly in your military career to that point, you're going to get your MBA. That can go a variety of different directions. That's one of the benefits, obviously, of an MBA. You get to look at a whole bunch of different things. And when did the sports business thing bite you? Because clearly something happened at Berkeley. You were a member of a bunch of the sports business clubs there and participated in a variety of competitions that were sports related, MIT Sloan and then NFL media. So how did the interest in this industry really start to gel for you?
I've been a lifelong fan. Football was my sport growing up. It's very much a part of my family on my paternal side. My dad played college football at USC. My grandfather played college football at USC and then played and coached professionally for his entire career. It was, literally the way my dad's family made money.
Mm-hmm.
And interesting side story there. My grandfather is the only NFL player in history with 3 double-digit interception seasons. And this is when they played 12 games.
Right.
Now, they didn't have all the rules to protect the quarterback that they have now. And maybe the accuracy of passing wasn't but still holds that record. He asked for a $2,000 salary increase in 1954 from the LA Rams, and they told him no. And so he went and got into coaching because you made more money as a coach because you could, and he went to the University of Washington and he was a teacher and coach and got his grad degree. And he saw that as a better option and career path than actually playing. Can you imagine in today's NFL, a shutdown cornerback asking for a $2,000 raise and being, so I was always fascinated by what were the economics behind that decision? Now, the 1950s NFL is very different than today's NFL, but it was always of interest to me. And I didn't have the stature, although my grandfather was probably about the same size as me, 5'10", 185 pounds. Again, different NFL.
Slot receiver size right there, baby.
Yeah. I'm very mediocre slot receiver. So that's been a part of my kind of my DNA. It's how our family connects. But then I get to Haas, and I'm looking at the traditional routes, investment banking, consulting, big tech, and I could see myself going one of those routes. But
no shortage of opportunity out here for that.
No shortage of opportunity. But I had a classmate who actually asked me to join their case competition team from Major League Baseball. You mentioned the case competitions, Major League Baseball case competition, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that project. I really enjoyed that project being focused on something that like I said, I felt like being a part of my DNA. And so I leaned into it, right? You mentioned the different things that I did during business school. I had no sports business on my resume, right? And so I had to build that somehow. And it was through cobbling together those types of things. And, and then it became kind of a burn the ships and take the island. I'm going to try to do this.
Right.
And I'm also sort of a bucker of convention. I mean, there was nobody else in my class who wanted to do this, class of 250, nobody else trying to get into sports. There was
even the people you were doing the case competitions with.
No, they were just doing it for fun. They were just doing it for fun. And so they were former consultants, big, Bain, McKinsey type consultants that just thought it'd be a fun thing to do. And, there was a boondoggle to Boston involved. It was for an MIT conference. And so, but I really enjoyed it and could see myself doing that professionally, early days. And so, I leaned into it fully.
This led to an internship at the Raiders while you're at Berkeley. Obviously the Raiders at this point are in Oakland, and it transitioned to full time after you graduated. Mm-hmm. And I think that's like the tried and true path for people who want to work in sports, right? Let's get my feet wet working for free inside the organization, do a good job, and then I catch on full time. So there's clearly a lot of people who listen to this who want to work in sports.
Mm-hmm.
That's the path. But I'm interested in your perspective on what was key for you in working for the Raiders to make that leap from intern to full time. Like, what made you successful in that role and open doors for you to work with the team?
Luck.
Yeah.
Right
It's
time,
amazing
right place.
how many times that comes up.
Right time, right place. I was exhausting, any and all informational interviews, whoever I could talk to in sports, Haas grads, Naval Academy grads, And to be honest, I was really kind of coming up short. It's an incredibly hard industry, as you know, to break into.
Yeah.
If you're not going in at like the inside sales level. That's often the route. You get into inside sales,
Yep.
either you continue on the sales route or you sort of, that's like the minor league system. And I didn't want to go that route, right? I wanted to kind of skip a few steps, which was going to be really challenging.
Yep.
And now you see more of that, but 10 years ago, you really didn't see as much of it. And so I got lucky that the then interim president of the Oakland Raiders was a Haas grad.
Okay.
About 15 years prior to me being there. And he had taken over an organization that was digging itself out of a financial hole. The Raiders were the only NFL team at the time, I think, that was losing money, had some bad contracts that they were
almost hard to imagine in the NFL.
Unwind. Yeah. In that business model, it really is, because the business model is so strong. And so Mark was tasked with riding the ship. But again, didn't have a ton of money, a ton of budget to do it, which again is surprising, but said, I'm going to go and now knowing Mark as well as I do, I'll start somewhere. Let's go back to the well of my alma mater and try to find somebody that's willing to do this for free. And I was the only one that raised my hand.
I'll do it.
So I jumped at the chance. And I mean, and to think an intern, and look, this isn't a coffee pouring exercise or doing copies. Right. Like, this was meaningful work that he was throwing me into. Maybe not at first. Well, kind of at first. And I just, like I said, I burned the ships and took the island. I moved all my classes to nighttime. My entire second year, I worked full time, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., then went to class, then did it over the next day. And I did it for free. And I did it for free for, several months, and then, transition the conversation to, hey, I've been doing a lot here. What's next? I can't work for free forever. And, we worked something out, but it was saying yes to everything. It was finding how I could fill gaps. It was aligning myself with the right person. I mean, an intern working for the president of the organization, or the interim president, he was later named president. It's sort of unthinkable. And then I mentioned luck. I mean, I also joined the organization at a really pivotal time where, we fixed the current situation in Oakland, reached a ceiling, and then kind of moved on and did some of the other things I did later in my career.
Yeah, I mean,
it was just right time, right place.
I appreciate that you started the conversation by saying, oh, it's luck. But, I think it's hard sometimes for people to take a good look at what makes them successful, and you just kind of go, oh, I attribute it was lucky. Yeah, okay, sure, there was a little bit of luck there. But to your point, there was a certain all-in kind of aspect. There was a pursuit aspect. There was a extending yourself to be in a position to be able to say yes to something. Mm-hmm. And being willing to shift the calendar around to be able to accommodate that kind of thing. So while luck certainly plays a role, I think there's a great lesson in there for people that, look, if you really want to do this, you have to stretch your comfort zone into places that they might not have ordinarily thought of or not be willing to do, right? There's plenty of people who would look at that and say, yeah, screw that. I'm not doing that. That sounds like work. and not being able to do it. You joined the Raiders at I think it's fair to say, consequential time. There was, you said it, right? And clearly the organization was not in the best financial position, but I mean, the location in Oakland was clearly getting untenable for what they needed it to be if we're going to be a competitive NFL franchise. The city of Oakland is its own. We could do a separate podcast just dealing with the city of Oakland. So that clearly didn't go anywhere. You look down south and think, man, can we do Los Angeles version 2? The Raiders return. That was its own animal as the NFL started to bring, the Rams were coming back, and then the Chargers came up. So that market got very loaded very quickly. And then the move to Las Vegas starts to come into focus. So can you, first of all, dive into your role with the Raiders and looking at relocation and how that process unfolded from your perspective? Like, what were your hands getting dirty with in that particular endeavor?
Yeah, as I mentioned, the early work was, how do we pick off as much of the low-hanging fruit as we can in Oakland in the current situation? Oakland Coliseum, built in 1967. Actually a great location, not a great facility.
Right. No, right off the freeway, Raiders, subway stops, the whole deal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Adjacency to the airport, right on, the freeway there, 880. So that wasn't necessarily the problem. Had adequate parking. It was really the facility, and then also the lease agreement. The Raiders were a secondary tenant there, didn't control a lot of the revenue streams.
Yeah.
And so we sort of reached a ceiling in terms of what we could generate from a local revenues standpoint. And in the NFL, everybody gets the same media rights check, right? Everyone gets the same national revenue check, whether you're the Cowboys or the then 32nd out of 32 teams in revenue Raiders. It's the local revenue that is sort of the difference between the have and the have-nots. And what drives that is the stadium situation, right? So we knew we had to get a new stadium deal done, wanted to do it in Oakland, reached an impasse. Yeah, separate episode on that. Right around that time, the league says we want to explore expansion into LA, like you said. Finished third in that race. Made a lot of sense for the Raiders to actually, the Raiders have more fans in Southern California than anywhere else, Northern California or Vegas. And it's still, and it's why Vegas makes so much sense is, Southern California being the feeder market, about 30% of visitors to Vegas come from Southern California. But we wouldn't figure that out until a little bit later. We go through that LA process. We learn a lot, which we then applied forward to Vegas. But the Vegas opportunity came very quickly off the heels of the ownership vote to send the Rams and Chargers to Los Angeles. And what we didn't know at the time was there was a big discussion happening here in Las Vegas around tourism infrastructure investment and an investment in the convention center and an investment in a stadium for UNLV, but also to capture all the content that at the time was flying over Vegas, right? If Taylor Swift is doing a stadium tour, she's not stopping in Vegas because there was no stadium adequate to host those summer tour. Previously UNLV was an outdoor stadium. And so, it's pretty untenable here during the summertime.
It's Las Vegas.
Outdoors.
Yeah.
So for an event like that. So we very quickly pivot to Las Vegas, start taking meetings there. And it was, we hit the ground running.
Fast tracking.
Very quickly got a $750 million investment from the state of Nevada, was involved in, the justification of that, helping tell the story of the power of the NFL and what events would be coming to the market, what that economic impact could be.
And the Golden Knights were there already, but with a relatively short tenure. So pro sports in the market were still relatively new.
Yeah, we started looking at the market prior to the Knights playing their first game. Right. They played their first game, I think, in October of 17.
Right.
And we started our, and we got the $750 million in September of 17. No, sorry, September of 16. We started taking meetings there in January of 16, gained ownership approval in March of 17, and then the Knights play their first game in October of 17. So a lot of that groundwork was laid before the Knights played their first game here. We didn't know how successful this was going to be, right? We studied it extensively and we thought it was going to be successful, but there wasn't like an analog.
I think it's also like for the longest period of time, Las Vegas was a radioactive from a pro sports standpoint, right? There was just no way with the sports books and the gambling and everything like that. Everybody ran. And then all of a sudden, like you said, overnight, things just seem to really start to fast track for you.
Well, there was two things we had on that. That's a really important point because, it is swung completely in the other direction from where it was even 10 years ago, right? There was a time when the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority tried to buy a Super Bowl commercial and the NFL wouldn't let them spend their $1 million for a 30-second spot because, it was a long time ago, so it probably was still $1 million because of the stigma around Las Vegas. Yeah. And it's interesting, right? Because if you look at where some of these NFL stadiums are, Detroit's right next to an MGM Grand Detroit. Pittsburgh is right next to Three Rivers Casino. So, okay. But what we had to unwind and help the owners understand is that these resort properties are actually highly diversified businesses that are not that dependent on gambling. Less than at the time, and I think it's still hovering right around then, but about a third of their revenue came from gaming. And actually the NFL had a rule that a gambling related enterprise was defined as generating more than a third of their revenue from gaming. And the NFL rules around doing business with casino resorts was that you couldn't do a business with a gambling related enterprise. And so kind of interesting because we said, well, they're not actually gambling related enterprises by definition because
by your own definition.
Yeah, exactly. So
thanks, NFL.
So that was part of it. And then the other part of it was just explaining that this is actually the most highly regulated place when it comes to gaming. Actually, the integrity of your game is safer here than anywhere else.
Almost anywhere else, just because of all the eyes on it.
Eventually, we got folks to come around to that.
There are, moving a franchise, I think people just they think of like the Colts in the middle of the night loading up the trucks and moving. And that's kind of what it takes. You just go from point A to point B. There are an impossible number of details that go along with relocating a franchise. We did it with Vancouver moving to Memphis, and that was in a relatively condensed timeline. It was nuts. It's just nuts. As you think back on relocation and taking the team from the Bay Area to Las Vegas, what was your biggest learning during that process? And what do you know now that you wish you could go back and say, hey, Brandon, you're going to want to pay attention to this?
Yeah. I'll give you another list of three things.
There you go. Like a good Navy man.
And this is the biggest one. Alignment is everything. You got to have a North Star for the organization.
Okay. Yep.
We spent a lot of time, and I led a lot of these efforts for, and I'm really proud of this, because not only did it help lead to successful outcomes, but it was also very transformative in terms of how I see business. When you can identify that North Star and align an organization around it, for us, it was a revenue goal, and the personal seat license program was really key because it was a key component of the capital stack that went to financing the stadium. I mentioned $750 from the state of Nevada. There was another $550 in PSLs. And then, the rest was from the NFL and privately financed. And eating and living and breathing that goal, and that goal being, the first thing everybody thinks about when they wake up in the morning, and the last thing they think about when they go to bed. It aligns the organization and gets everybody rowing in the same direction.
How does this activity get us closer to our North Star?
But it gives people like, why am I going to work today?
Yeah.
Right. And especially with young people these days, like, have to have purpose and mission and like people kind of bang on millennials for that. And, whatever the next generation down is, but it makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, to use a navigational, reference, like you're a ship without a rudder.
Yeah.
You have no North Star. There's no wind in your sails, and you're taking on water. Right. And so
that is a tough analogy right there. Yikes.
Tough. Yeah. It's a sinking ship. And so we try to stay away from those in the Navy. And so you establish this North Star, incredibly powerful. That's the first one. Second one would be like, and this sort of is a military thing too, but no plan survives first contact. Partway through the process, and just a few weeks before the ownership vote, we had partnered with Sheldon Adelson and Sands Corporation as a capital partner on the stadium. Well, he backed out, and we had to find, a backup plan.
A couple weeks before the meeting.
We had to find, $650 million, and Bank of America swooped in and agreed to finance that part of the project. And that was a stressful couple weeks. And we had to obviously get B of A comfortable with our business plan. We'd done a lot of work though, up to that point, to where it was, not relatively easy to explain that.
Right, you had the story that you could tell.
Indeed. Exactly. Well said. And then I would say from a leadership standpoint, as I look back on it, focus less on trying to do everything yourself, empower others to do more. Yeah. Young guy taking on this, trying to conquer the world. Certainly there were things that I'm really proud that I did. But there are a lot of things that, others could have done, just as well or potentially better. And so that, a leadership lesson that I continue to build and grow upon.
Well, that ability to delegate, that is not always easy when you're used to being the person driving the train.
Yeah.
Or steering the boat in this particular analogy. You relocated with the team, obviously. You go down to Vegas. You stick with the team for a little bit, but clearly something happened where you felt like, you know what? Time for me to do something of my own, and you chose to launch Sports and Entertainment Advisors. Was the entrepreneurial thing always in the back of your mind, or was there just there was a moment where you decided this is the right time? Like, how did it all come together in your mind?
So COVID hits in March of 20. By that point, the commercial strategy had been, the playbook had been run, and we had over $2 billion in COI through the door, against a $1.4 billion goal. Like, the project was in a really good place. There's still a little bit of meat on the bone, but the vast majority of my work was done. I was starting to create and stand up new businesses, but a lot of that was sort of winding down. And really what I came to the conclusion of, or sort of the light bulb went off, is this organization is shifting from, build, grow to maintain and service.
Yeah.
And right, you've got all these massive founding partnership deals, and all these season ticket holders who have bought PSLs. Now you need to deliver an experience against that, which is great and is a huge challenge. And we created a plan, and we had strategic partners to help us execute. But that type of organization is just a little less exciting to me.
Yeah, you had really been entrepreneurial with the whole relocation and everything like that. And once that itch is scratched, it's hard to unscratch it.
Yeah. So whether it was doing that again for another organization or doing it for multiple properties, one of the things I loved about my role at the Raiders is that, no day was the same. I was always working with multiple departments or multiple external stakeholders, multiple properties. I enjoy that nature of, and it's very similar to what we do now with SEA, having multiple climate clients, solving multiple problems simultaneously. That's fun to me. That's how I'm wired. And so, the catalyst was, candidly, my boss left the organization kind of suddenly. And I go, all right, well, now is as good of time as any to go figure out what that next step for me is.
Yeah.
And, I did think that I would go work for another organization, but an organization that's in the same place that the Raiders were in 2012, 2013, when I got there, it's very rare, right? An organization that's digging itself out of a hole, that's facing potential, new stadium project and relocation. It's very, very unique.
Yeah.
And so, and then you got to think about leadership and ownership, and, is that the right fit? So I credit Oakview Group and Tim Lywicki, who was my first client, hired me to do a project at Climate Pledge Arena and create a new business for them there. And that kind of got my feet wet in the consulting business. And then, you're having conversations like you and I are, and you just, you're consulting.
Oh, you're doing that. And okay, well, you should
you
talk to this person.
Exactly. And then, and then I put some infrastructure around it, and now it's burn the ships and take the island on SEA.
So it's fair to say then, like, based on that, it wasn't that you had like, here's what I'm going to do and here's what Sports and Entertainment Advisors is going to be. It came along the lines of, I want to do something that's going to energize me in a way that process I just did with the Raiders took place. Maybe I don't have the full shape around it yet, but let's throw my hat into the ring. Tim Lywicki, Oakview Group, Climate Pledge come along, and that starts to make you think, oh, this is what this should be.
Yeah. I saw when I made the leap, I knew that the demand, the network, the expertise, the experience was there, foundationally, the reputation. But it took a little while to figure out, okay, what's the there? There's a there, but what is it?
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I saw being an executive at a club who needed help, who's, running a lean organization that's maintaining business in Oakland and kind of trying to land that plane softly with building a massive, project here in Las Vegas. Those are two full-time jobs, often done by one person.
Yeah.
I was fortunate that my boss put me on Vegas full-time. I had no Oakland responsibilities. But a lot of organizations are navigating very similar challenges. And to have somebody that has done it before, there's a lot of comfort and certainty in that. And also, one of the things that I found was, maybe a bit of a differentiator is, and I know we may talk about others, but I never liked the feeling of somebody coming in and selling business and then I never saw them again, right? From a consulting standpoint.
Sure.
Because oftentimes that person was that senior leader. That was the person I wanted.
Yeah, I didn't buy that. I didn't buy the 22-year-old.
Yeah. The third or fourth order person who shows up, and so I saw that. Everybody's trying to generate more revenue, but everybody is looking for seasoned experience, been there, done that, to kind of help de-risk their project. And so I saw that as a huge opportunity.
So is that the differentiator then? Is it? Because there's like we've talked about in the past, there's no shortage of companies out there that are trying to say, oh, we can help you build more revenue and things like that. Is that the key then? You're looking for professional experience that knows how this works, has demonstrated competency, and oh, by the way, the same guy who did that is going to be doing the work, right?
Yeah.
That access to the principal is a key differentiator for you and SEA. Is that a fair assessment?
I think so. Look, at this point, people aren't hiring SEA for sports and entertainment advisors. They're hiring SEA for Brandon Dahl.
Yeah, fair.
And so if that's why they're hiring SEA, that's what they should get.
Right.
And I think that is a differentiator. But I also think, look, we're not just strategy guys. We're not lifelong consultants. We've executed. We've been operational. And so we can help you shape the strategy or shape
no
it
ivory
for
tower
you.
here. Yeah.
And then we can execute against it with you and get down in the trenches. And so I think that is a differentiator. And then, one of the other things that I noticed when we would hire third parties, they'd say, well, in, name the municipality, on this stadium project, we did this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, but this is Vegas. It's a little bit different. Don't you think like the playbook should be altered slightly? And it's like, we've done this before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, buddy.
And I would find holes in that. So I think that's the other thing is just the, customization. We kind of rip up the playbook every time and create a new one for our projects. And, it's got to be tailored to each partner's context and goals.
Yeah. I think the best phrase I ever heard on that topic was as consistent as possible, different when necessary.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is, right? You got 32 NFL football teams.
Yeah.
Don't tell anybody. We just got to make sure that we keep up with that. That was all us. Is there a specific client experience that you think about that you've worked on at this point? You brought up Climate Pledge. You brought up some of the work you did with Oakview. Are there what part of those or other client experiences do you feel like really helps tell the story of what SEA is doing and what you hope to do?
Yeah. And I've got to be a little careful here about, talking about specifics around clients and engagements.
No, I want phone numbers and I want
last four mother's maiden name
documents put in the chat.
But no, that's another, I had a top secret clearance when I was in the military, so I take confidentiality very seriously. Yeah. But no, like in terms of client types, we have one client who has, a pretty large portfolio of events and had created those events for TV. And the leader of that business, to his credit, always thought, we're leaving something on the table when it comes to ticketing. We're sort of putting the tickets on sale and yeah, sure, we're promoting it, but and so brought in SEA to evaluate the ticketing business. And we said, yeah, there's a lot of levers you can pull here to optimize your ticketing business and generate significantly more revenue in that area of your business, which makes those events, the actual standalone event before you sell any advertising against it, very sustainable. And so, what we did there is look at pricing, look at, the product mix, which they don't control the venue. So that's not a lever you can really pull, but pricing and scaling. Distribution is a huge one. Mm-hmm. We are an industry that sells our products at oftentimes one point of sale or one outlet, right? Think about a ticket that sells, an organization that only sells their tickets on the primary market on Ticketmaster. Well, that's not the only place people shop for tickets, right? These days they're on StubHub, Vivid Seats, SeatGeek. And when you Google a ticket for, San Francisco Giants fan, San Francisco Giants, you'll get hits for all those other companies.
The Giants are like the ninth one to come up.
Well, yeah, exactly. So why not a CPG company wouldn't sell paper towels just at Walmart.
Right.
They sell them everywhere people are shopping for paper towels. Target, Safeway, name your local grocery retailer. So thinking about it that way, right? Having inventory on those marketplaces and then, how the event is promoted. We've pulled all those levers and been really successful, double-digit increases year over year. And had a lot of success there. I think there's also, when I go back to that North Star exercise, we've helped organizations identify their North Star. I've gone into organizations where I said, what is the goal for, I'll use ticketing again as an example. What's the goal for your ticketing business? And you hear to sell as many tickets as possible. Well, that's not a goal, right? So does that mean 80,000? Well, no, the stadium only seats 60. Okay. So is it 60? Well, no, we're not going to sell 60. Okay. What is it? And by when? Let's plant a flag in the ground. Let's get everybody rowing in the same direction. Let's burn the ships and take the island. And so that's work that we love to do. And then, finally going back to my my Raiders experience, I think having somebody on a project, if you don't have somebody already, sometimes, it's a challenge because maybe you have a CRO that's still running the existing business, wants to be involved in the new stadium project, but can't fully concentrate on it from a
their
revenue
heads
generation
down.
standpoint.
Yeah.
So we act as like an owner's representative for revenue. And I find that's often really beneficial to our clients and has led to some great outcomes as well. Sort of corporate strategy, individual business assessment, and then, kind of that owner's rep for revenue. Those are three of the main areas we play.
It's funny too, like that ability just to come in as an outsider to an organization. Like everybody's got their day job inside the business and they're doing all these things, and being able to come in from the outside and getting that broader purview where you just see things differently because you're coming with different context that you can bring to the table and think, okay, well, this is the way other teams have done it. Maybe they should consider that here. Frankly, just have the time to be able to look at the business in a way that, and it's kind of unfair, I think, sometimes to the people who are inside the organization, because sometimes they'll be like, man, I feel like I've been saying that for 2 years, but it's like, I got the benefit of being the outside voice here. Sometimes it's just going to take that to help move the needle. As you think about where SEA is headed and where you want it to head, and you think about revenue generation and what teams are really starting to think about, what are they pulling on your coat about the most right now? And what gets you excited about the trajectory of sports and entertainment advisors and how you're going to address it?
I'm looking a lot at the college space right now, and not surprisingly, specifically in the college space, everybody's trying to find $20 million for this house settlement. Everybody's trying to navigate NIL. Everybody's trying to, for lack of a better term, sort of professionalize the revenue generating side of their business. I think there's an incredible amount of opportunity there. Private equity is, not at the door. They're in the building.
They're in the building
in a lot of these organizations. And, that's great. However, private equity expectations and returns are different than maybe your typical ownership structure.
Yeah.
And I think with that is going to come an additional layer of sophistication that's required that we've, as an industry, I think sort of gotten away with. I use this example a lot. Imagine walking down the aisle of like the dishwashing detergent aisle at Target, doesn't matter the aisle, but at Target, and seeing a guy with his shirt off with a big red circle, like the Target logo painted on his chest. Like, it sounds ridiculous, but go to any stadium or arena and you're going to see some crazed fan that's just embraced your brand in a way that's completely irrational.
Sports are different.
Like self-identified, sports are different. But what if we looked at our customers as deeply, as thoughtfully, as analytically as Target did, right? There's that story about the family who Target found out that their daughter was pregnant before they did because of some of her spending habits, and were sending offers based on that. And the dad got all pissed off, like, why are you sending these offers to our house? Nobody's
diapers.
Pregnant.
Right,
and so, that's, a little big brother-ish or whatever. And,
that's the world we live in.
That's the world we live in.
Right.
And so lean into that. We have this benefit of having unbelievable products. I'm
with Brandon Dahl. He is the founder and CEO of Sports and Entertainment Advisors. And Brandon, it's a great conversation, right? Like we talked about, this is something we got to try to keep these things at 30, 45 minutes, right? It's, people's attention spans and everything, but no. We could keep going. But we do have one more thing we got to do.
Yes, sir.
And that is the lightning round. And you went to the U.S. Naval Academy, and I have 2 kids who went to the U.S. Naval Academy. So we're going to do lightning round U.S. Navy edition.
Love it.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Are you sure? You want to make your list of 3 about the Navy, how to prepare for the lightning round? All right. So just first thing that pops in your head. No prep. Here we go. As we established, you were on the USS Boxer, which carries up to 1,800 U.S. Marines and puts them to and fro. How many crayons does that number of Marines eat on a typical cruise?
1,800. What's 1,800 times about 180? What's that? 40,000 crayons.
That's a lot of crayons. Anyway, you slice it. Are there a favorite color? Do the Marines gravitate towards it?
Probably like marine grunt green, if that was a crayon.
Okay. All right. Now we just
love my Marines though.
A lot of crayons. Roughest seas you were ever in?
Oh man, we did have some seas going across the Pacific one time where I was on a 40,000 ton warship where
Big boat.
The flight deck is, I forget all these facts and figures of this, very, very far above the water line.
Yes, it is.
And we had water coming over the bow of the ship. 100 feet.
What?
But I will say this, I slept like a baby through all those. I never slept as well as I did on the USS Boxer. Pitch black rooms, very cold, and just this nice rocking you to sleep. Yeah.
Okay. Noted. So if you're suffering from sleep troubles, join the Navy. Like we said, when you went to the Naval Academy, you were in the boxing club at the United States Naval Academy. What's the hardest you ever got hit in the face?
Actually, not at the Naval Academy. I boxed in high school as well.
And
my boxing coach took me to a gym in a rough area of Stockton, California.
Oh, yeah.
And this kid just
lit you up.
Beat the crap out of me. It was and I got a big chin too, so it kind of hangs out there. I wasn't a great boxer, very mediocre boxer. Mediocre athlete if you're following the storyline there. But I still remember that one.
Okay. All right. Best Army Navy game memory.
Actually, much earlier than my time at the academy, watching those games when I was a kid with my grandfather. He went to the academy as well.
Oh, there you go. Got the legacy there. Okay. And finally, any choice words for the folks who ended up at West Point?
Go Navy, beat Army.
No, what else really needs to be said?
That was a softball.
That was a softball. We ended on an easy one. Come on. Brendal, really appreciate the time, man.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for having me on, David.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the One-on-One Sports Business Conversations podcast. If you enjoyed it, we always appreciate a subscribe, share, comment, or like. And don't forget, you can always find past episodes at abcpartners.com/podcast. This podcast is written, produced, edited, and hosted by Dave Almy. And theme music was composed by Scott Holmes.